First, the proposed budget contains $1.5 million annually for veterinary care for military pets, not guard dogs, pets. A $1 billion line item from which morale enhancement activities are funded. These include items such as squash courts, golf courses, bingo operations, reduced price liquor, and naval riding stables. I'm not necessarily attacking programs, but I am saying that if education must be cut by almost $3 billion, perhaps we should look at some of these items. After seeing some of these frills, I have to wonder with what importance some of Mr. Reagan's staff advisors view the education of our children. Always been very supportive of what we get, as I considered. On the surface, we don't feel our state can afford this expenditure. Alabama does not have the tax base from which to support these expenditures. Thus, programs will be cut and our children will suffer if we are interpreting the...
On October 13, 1981, the Public Service Commission told the power company it could not have any of the $325 million in higher rates it asked for. Immediately, the power company asked the Supreme Court to reverse the decision and allow them to collect the increase while the decision to reverse was being considered. Today's decision by the court only allows the power company to collect the increase under bond during the interim period, but the court decided to let the utility collect only 75 of the $325 million and only during the next 6 months. The court ruled that the PSC didn't consider the $4 million a month it cost the power company to operate its new Unit 2 reactor at the Farley Nuclear Power Plant. The PSC says it didn't think it had to consider those costs because they weren't included in the data the Commission uses to make its rate decisions. The court will now look at the overall case and issue another ruling in the future, which could change rates again. The power company says it hasn't had time to figure out what impact the court's decision will have on your power bill. It says it should have that information next week. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Supreme Court.
We know that it's going to be a nice game tonight, a real hard-fought game, a real spectator game, and we know tomorrow night is going to be the same kind of game. I think our players have been looking forward to this weekend for a while, and there's no doubt that this AUM basketball team is really a mature team that has matured in the last 5-6 weeks. They're a very talented team. There's no doubt about that. My coaching hasn't had anything to do with their success, believe me. So I think that this weekend is what basketball is all about.
The championship meet features kids aged 9 to 18 from 12 different teams throughout the state. The Montgomery Majestics, along with the City Park and Recreation Department, is sponsoring the event at the Fort Dixie Graves National Guard Armory. Competition began this morning with a beginner level and continued this afternoon with compulsory exercises. And the meet will conclude tomorrow with optional routines. Meet Director Ken Day says it should be an exciting day of competition.
We'll be having what we call the optional competition, where the girls will be doing the more difficult skills. They've been doing the aerial somersaulting type skills with the various twists. We'll be doing competition on the vaulting, uneven parallel bars, balance beam, and the floor exercise.
Tomorrow's final session of competition will begin at 10 a.m. Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports.
Ready for the Olympics?
Yes, I feel I needed a change. I have been in Auburn for 6 years, and I still love that school dearly, and I still go back there and visit and work out with the team occasionally. But I feel as though I needed a change, and I went to Florida State down in Tallahassee to train and really gear my pattern toward 1984. The club that I'm running for out of Oregon is sponsored by Nike, and I am a Nike rep, and so everything is kind of going up roses right now. Everything is leading right toward 84 the way I wanted to. There's no guessing. I know where my goal is. The only thing I have to do now is to continue to strive forward and do the best I can to achieve it.
It was a low-scoring first half as the visiting Chargers used a control offense to their advantage to take a 19-18 lead at intermission. But the Senators picked up the pace in the second half, taking the lead behind the game-high 25 points of Jesse Iceman Phillips. That's him scoring from the corner. UAH was paced by the 15 points of Mississippi State transfer Randy Jordan. He scores here from long range. But the story of the game came down to the final 5 seconds of the second overtime period. Michael Thomas hit both ends of a 1-and-1, giving AUM a big 58-56 win over UAH. The Senators face Athens State for homecoming tomorrow night. A win will ensure AUM of no less than a tie for the championship in the Southern States Conference. Reporting from AUM, Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports.
The Public Service Commission denied Alabama Power Company a record $325 million rate hike request last year. The Supreme Court told her yesterday it now allows the company to temporarily collect a $150 million rate hike that will have to be refunded if the court eventually upholds the PSC decision. Camp says commission attorneys are already preparing a motion asking the court to reconsider its decision, which allows the utility to collect another $75 million in rates over a 6-month period, while the justices make a final determination in the case. According to Camp, corrective legislation is needed in order for the commission to do a better job of regulating utilities, because he says at this point in time, the commission's hands are tied. Camp focused a lot of attention on one main issue concerning the Alabama Power case, that which deals with the test year and the online hookup of Farley 2 nuclear plant near Dothan.
We need a law that clarifies when a plant that has been certificated by this commission comes into the rate base. It is unfair for customers to have to pay for that facility before it goes online and starts generating electricity. I think we would all agree with that. It is equally unfair for a company to have that facility online, making electricity and providing it to the customers and not be getting anything for it. I think all of us are fair enough to recognize that point also. And that's what we were trying to prove in this rate case. The company wanted the rates prior to it coming online. We said you can't have them, and clearly told them in the brief to the court that if you file with us effective the day the facility comes online, we'll give that consideration, that you've got that right. But they never did that. So I would say we need a law that would prohibit them from putting it in the rate base one day prior to it coming online and going commercial.
The temporary increase is retroactive to October 16th of last year and will go into effect once Alabama Power files new tariffs with all parties involved. Camp says the higher rates will result in a 10% increase in the average residential power bill. Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
Justice Beatty, Justice Adams.
Let me call you sweetheart, I'm in love. When the marchers came into Selma yesterday, they were only about 50 strong, but they had covered 150 miles in the first week of the march. And today, the marchers were joined by many local citizens, filling the Dallas County Courthouse, calling for extension of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. The hearing lasted several hours, with testimony coming from people from around the nation. One speaker said it would be cruel and unusual punishment to black and poor people if the Voting Rights Act is not extended, while another said although many white people say they support the act, their actions show otherwise and they are holding black people down. But two speakers captured the crowd's enthusiasm more than the rest. One was political activist Angela Davis of Oakland, California, who made a surprise appearance.
The effort to rob us of the vote is a part of the effort to rob black people and people of color and working people all over this country of their rights, of their very right to earn a living. What happens here in Alabama will affect what happens to black people all over this country. All over this country.
And the president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, Dr. Joseph Lowry, told the hearing officials the nation is now in a retreat from justice.
That there is the depth of oppression still remaining in the land of the free and the home of the brave.
The march appears to be gaining strength the closer it gets to Montgomery. About 200 people crammed into the Dallas County Courthouse for today's hearing. Tomorrow, many of them will cross the Alabama River as they approach the final leg of their journey. When they reach the Capitol steps, the marchers hope to have 300 or more people in tow. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News in Selma.
Last year we split a close one up there by one, and we beat them real badly here, probably as bad as anybody we beat. This year we go to their place first, and it's, I mean, they play awfully well, and then we lose by 3. We know that they're not going to beat themselves, and we think that we're in a good position because we're a better basketball team than we have ever been since I've been here. Our players have always given themselves a chance to win and win, and that's all we've ever asked them, and I think they'll certainly play awfully hard, both teams, tomorrow night in our homecoming game. Our team, with, you know, the confidence that they have
First, the proposed budget contains $1.5 million annually for veterinary care for military pets, not guard dogs, pets. A $1 billion line item from which morale enhancement activities are funded. These include items such as squash courts, golf courses, bingo operations, reduced price liquor, and naval riding stables. I'm not necessarily attacking programs, but I am saying that if education must be cut by almost $3 billion, perhaps we should look at some of these items. After seeing some of these frills, I have to wonder with what importance some of Mr. Reagan's staff advisors view the education of our children. Always been very supportive of what we get, are considered. On the surface, we don't feel our state can afford this expenditure. Alabama does not have the tax base from which to support these expenditures. Thus, programs will be cut and our children will suffer if we are interpreting the...
Well, I think what's got to happen is we've got to get a quick start against somebody and get the confidence flowing again so we can get a full game put together. Right now, we're only playing in spurts, and spurts not good enough to win this league.
Speaking of quick starts, you play Mississippi State Saturday, a team that's notoriously slow at handling the ball. Is that going to present a lot of problems?
I think so, unless we can get the lead. If we can get the lead and make them play the way we want them to play, then it could be different. But They have been able to dictate tempo to a lot of ball clubs, and they've been able to stay in the games that they do that. But we've got to get after them defensively, and we've got to hit our shots early.
In upsetting LSU, Georgia also broke a 23-game home court winning streak for the Tigers. Dominic Wilkins was the key man for the Bulldogs. He had 17 points. This one from long range gave Georgia an early 6-point lead. Howard Hi-C Carter put LSU in the lead at 20-18 when he cans this 10-footer. Carter led all scorers with 22. But when Vern Fleming converts inside, Georgia took the lead for good at 24-22. In the second half, the Bulldogs increased their lead. Eric Marbury hits here to make it 37-30. Marbury had 16 for Georgia. When Terry Fair gets this tap in, the Dogs had their biggest lead at 9. But LSU fought back, Carter doing most of the work. This bucket inside pulled the Tigers within 1 at 52-51 with 3:12 remaining. But down the stretch, it was Georgia free throw shooting that won it. Marbury hit 4 in the final 16 seconds to preserve the 57-51 win. Georgia, a winner of 4 straight now, improves to 7-7 in the SEC. LSU now falls to 10-4 out of a first-place tie.
His visit to the oil rig behind me is strictly business. The governor is making a commercial plugging his strategy on how the state should spend its oil lease money. At issue is what to do with $450 million the state earned by giving oil drilling rights in the Bay. It's a one-shot lump sum, and the governor would like to put it in a trust fund. Thus the message behind his mission.
I hope we got the message, and the message is very simple. We, people of Alabama, have $450 million, and we need to tie it down and preserve the principle, save the principle, and tie down how the interest will be spent so it will not be squandered into bureaucracy. That's why I'm cutting this commercial in the first place.
James says the commercial will cost $70,000 to $80,000 to make as well as air, and that the money will not come from the state's coffers, but will be raised by people who agree with him. As we caught the camera crew unloading their equipment, we asked how the governor fared as commercial talent.
He's a good person to work with, and he delivers his lines well. I think the reason he does that is because he's real. He's not, there's nothing lacquer about him.
No goof-ups.
No real goof-ups. He does fewer takes than a lot of professional actors that we use.
Thus a star is born over what to do with oil lease money.
All of these people have something in common. They're all open heart patients and have gathered for the American Heart Association's Open Heart Open House, being held at the Governor's Mansion. Today's meeting is in conjunction with Heart Fund Month, designated in February. Each person has his or her story to tell concerning their experience as an open heart patient.
This is the way that the Montgomery County chapter of the American Heart Association is honoring the people who have had open heart surgery. We were kind of amazed when we started planning this thing to find that there were some 400 to 600 patients in the Montgomery area. And this is a way that the money in which the Heart Association uses for their education and for the testing and for the laboratory work that is done to aid the heart patient. And this is to show you the proof that people can survive and do well after open heart surgery.
Heart Fund officials say the Open Heart Gathering, which originated last year, has become a great success, and they expect it to become bigger and better each year. From the Governor's Mansion, Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
Judge Sam Taylor is a serious student of the law and is known to be tough on criminals when the evidence shows that there is a threat to the public. In this portion of our conversation, sentencing, the rights of victims, and several other topics were discussed.
The sentencing is the toughest part of this job because you're dealing with people's lives and their freedom and so forth. And it's worrisome, and you're bound to take it home with you because it's so important. You've got a lot of factors to consider. We spend a lot of time studying the subject of sentencing, and you've got to consider, of course, trying to deter that person from going out and doing the same thing again. You've got to consider For one thing, the possible benefit of simply isolating him from the rest of the people if he's going to do something bad. Yes, sir. You've got to consider rehabilitating him. You don't want somebody to be a hardened criminal or be a lifetime criminal if you can help it. You'd rather rehabilitate him. And like with young people, you frequently make every effort. Maybe you get them into a pretrial diversion program, or you treat them as a youthful offender, or you do something other than to put them in prison. Because despite all everybody does, when somebody goes to prison, he is associating with people who've committed crimes and who talk about how to commit crimes. And so if you've got a young person, you don't want to put them in that prison if there's another feasible alternative. And then you've got to consider the victim. I think the victim is a forgotten person in the whole criminal process. They have to come up here and testify maybe at a preliminary hearing, and then before the grand jury, and then at a trial, and it's really a hassle. And we need to establish a little bit better system so that the victim isn't the one that ends up being punished in a criminal case. I tend to, I suppose, spend an inordinate amount of time working with or agonizing over sentencing because I do find it hard to do, and after you've done it, you don't know if you've done right.
What?
Montgomery Police Chief Charles Swindle says the incident took place at the corner of Conn Street and Cleveland Avenue shortly after 10 o'clock. Swindle says the officers, M.H. Coker and M.L. Yates, stopped Davenport for questioning. Davenport allegedly would not cooperate with the officers and then resisted arrest. Swindle says the officers and Davenport got into a skirmish that carried the trio in front of a house at 1624 Cleveland Avenue. Swindle says at that point, some of Davenport's relatives who lived in the house allegedly attacked police.
Another Davenport by the name of Aaron Davenport came out of the house and assaulted the officer that was helping his partner arrest the first Davenport, and had him pinned up against the house or what have you there, and was trying to take his pistol when a black female hit that same officer beside the head with a Coca-Cola bottle. The officer regained his footing. The man still trying to take his pistol away from him, and the officer drew his pistol and shot him in the side, and then put the pistol on the other man. It was choking the other officer on the street with his nightstick.
Charged with assault in connection with the incident are 32-year-old Aaron Davenport, the brother of the shooting victim, and 28-year-old Annie Mae Davenport, all of 1624 Cleveland Avenue. Charges are pending against Larry Davenport. Chief Swindle says the officers who sustained minor injuries in the incident acted properly. The Sheriff's Department and the District Attorney's Office is investigating the shooting, which is required when any police officer is involved in a shooting incident. City Councilman Luther Oliver was also at police headquarters last night looking into the shooting. The incident happened in his district.
In 1965, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and several hundred of his followers gathered in front of the Brown Chapel in Selma to start a voting rights march to Montgomery. It was to be a march plagued by violence. Today, about 800 marchers gathered at the same church to follow the same path, to fight for the same cause. The crowd sang, chanted, clapped hands, and waved signs, and there were words from leaders in the crowd criticizing state and national government leaders for standing in the way of civil rights.
It appears, our Father, that the mood of this nation is against us. But in spite of all of that, we are not discouraged.
Yes.
Because we know that you are with us.
Yes, sir.
And that you didn't bring us this far.
Well,
just to leave us.
Then the march was underway. One speaker said earlier the spirit of Martin Luther King was with them in their cause. That spirit seemed most visible when the marchers crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge, where 1960s marchers met with bloody opposition. Today, there was no visible opposition, and the marchers knelt and prayed in memory of those who marched before them in the name of civil rights. In all, the march was both like and unlike the 1965 march. There were many of the same slogans, songs, and landmarks, but there was no violence, and lawmen led the marchers on their way. The marchers went 12 miles today. They hope to reach Montgomery and end their week-and-a-half journey later this week. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News in Selma.
They gathered at the same Brown's Chapel Church in Selma from which the late Dr. Martin Luther King led his famous march 17 years ago. Their hope to get Congress to renew the Voting Rights Act it passed after King's march.
And it looks like the gains that we've made and we've struggled and we've cried and we've sweated and we've died for. It looks like those gains are in danger of being taken away from us.
About 800 demonstrators marched out of Selma over the Edmund Pettus Bridge, where during one of the demonstrations of the 60s, Alabama authorities charged demonstrators with horses, clubs, and bullwhips.
We pause now on this historic spot. We remember those who first pioneered this trail, whose heads were met and blooded, but their heads were never bowed.
This demonstration is the final phase of a 140-mile crusade which began 8 days ago in Pickens County, Alabama. The 50-mile trip to Montgomery will take 5 days. Sam Ford, CBS News, Selma, Alabama. About 800 demonstrators in Selma, Alabama attempted to repeat history yesterday, restaging the 1965 Selma to Montgomery March for the Voting Rights Act, hoping this time to persuade Congress to extend that law, now scheduled to expire this summer. One of those leading across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in the 60s and yesterday was Atlanta City Councilman John Lewis, a former lieutenant of the late Dr. Martin Luther King. He recalled that his first march 17 years ago failed.
17 years ago was very similar to this day. It was about this time, a beautiful Sunday afternoon, when we attempted to march across the bridge. But we had no idea on that day. We thought we would be stopped, but we had no idea that we would face the type of violence that we faced.
The demonstrators yesterday prayed at the foot of the bridge, recalling the people who had been beaten, tear-gassed, and bullwhipped for seeking the right to vote.
Ain't gonna let Ronald Reagan. No.
This demonstration started 9 days ago as a 140-mile crusade from Pickens County, Alabama to Montgomery by a small band of demonstrators to protest the imprisonment of 2 Pickens County voter registration workers. But it has become a minor renaissance of the civil rights movement across the Alabama Black Belt. Last night in a backwoods church, the demonstrators heard Tony Liuzzo of Detroit, whose mother, Viola Liuzzo, was killed during the 1965 march by members of the Ku Klux Klan.
I want to tell you I love you. I'm just honored. I feel deeply from my heart to walk on this march, to be here, to walk the footsteps that my mother walked, because it's something that I was going to say finish the work, but it's something we'll never finish. It's something our children, our children's children, and their children will have to pick up and carry on in our footsteps.
There may be problems for these demonstrators when they arrive in Montgomery on Thursday. The city council there has denied a parade permit which would allow them to march past the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church where Dr. Martin Luther King began his civil rights activity. The Reverend Joseph Lowry, who leads this march, has said, quote, "We're going up Dexter Avenue or to the Montgomery jail." Sam Ford, CBS News, Selma, Alabama. Right
Riding the crest of that upset of LSU yesterday, Georgia came to Greensboro looking to knock off second-ranked North Carolina. But the Tar Heels came out smoking, hitting their first 10 shots to take an early 13-point lead. James Worthy led the way. This bucket off the fast break made it 14-3 early. Worthy led Carolina with 19. Georgia fired back, though. They ran off 10 unanswered points of their own. Then they took the lead late in the half at 29-27 on this jumper from the key by Dominic Wilkins. Wilkins had a great day, 19 points, 10 rebounds, and 5 block shots. But second half turnovers led to Georgia's downfall. When Matt Doherty jams it home here off the steal, the Tar Heels were back up by 8. Georgia again cut it to 1 with this Vern Fleming bucket off the drive. But that was as close as the Dogs would come. When Worthy scores off this steal, Carolina was on the way to a 56-57 win. The Tar Heels improved their record to 20-2. Georgia falls to 13-9.
They filled the hallways, and they were in almost every room. Unemployed workers looking for a little financial relief in the form of extended unemployment compensation. Starting today, the state is extending benefits to jobless workers whose regular unemployment benefits ran out, and the news was obviously welcomed by many. People like Diane Bibb, a 24-year-old clerk who's been out of a job over a year, and Fred Gaddis, 42 years old, who worked 9 years as an auto body repairman. Now, 9 months since he lost his job and 5 months since his benefits expired, he's still looking for work and a way to pay the bills for his family of 6. And these are just a few of the 30,000 or so workers the state expects to cash in on the extended benefits. Today at this office, 6 people handled nothing but extended benefits claims, trying to move the crowds of people in and out as quickly as possible to make way for more. The director of this office, Haney Harrison, says it will probably be 2 weeks before the people who file today receive any benefits. But many of them suggest with unemployment still rising and the job market smaller than ever before, they have nothing to do but wait. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
This will take them by Dr. Martin Luther King's church, which they had said was a priority with them, and we support their right to peacefully demonstrate and to make their views known. We're doing all we can in the city of Montgomery to avoid any confrontation or any act that would give rise to a confrontation, as we want them to come and peacefully express their views. We guarantee them that they will have a peaceful, safe visit to Montgomery, and we in turn ask them to respect the rules that have been laid down by the City Council.
At first glance, this may look like an athletic club, but it's not. It's part of Blount International's Employee Fitness Center. Employees use all sorts of exercise equipment, from weight machines to stationary bicycles to the popular racquetball courts. Both male and female employees and their spouses can take advantage of the facilities before and after work. Some even work out on their lunch hour.
Dan, we've got a very strong commitment on the part of management to the overall fitness of both physical as well as the mental fitness of our employees.
I think it's a unique program. I think it's I know it helps me mentally as well as physically, and I'm really enthused about it.
It's a great way to warm up before you go out and jog every day.
You feel like it does you a lot of good as far as being able to perform better on the job, being able to come in the middle of the day and exercise like this?
Much better, especially mentally, because you can react so much quicker.
An ongoing program at Blount is a stop smoking clinic, which is highly encouraged. While Blount officials readily admit the health program is expensive, they feel the money is well spent and is a good investment. Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
Amendments 1, 2, and 3 are part of Governor James's investment plan for the $449 million in oil lease money the state received from oil companies. The companies placed bids on more than 230,000 acres of submerged land off Mobile Bay for drilling rights. Amendment 1 would set up a board of trustees made up of the governor, state treasurer, director of finance, and trustees appointed by the governor, lieutenant governor, and speaker of the House. The board would be responsible for investing the oil lease money in specific plans like U.S. Treasury notes that would earn the highest possible interest for the state. That interest would then go into the state's general fund. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News.
They got you. Smile. Smile, you look at the camera.
Work to make jobs a key priority in state government. Thank you, and I'll take any questions. The rural counties of District 23 have borne a disproportionate share of the hardship of this current recession. The unemployment rate in these counties is 3 and 4 times the state average. New businesses and job formation in these counties stand at a shockingly low level. These counties epitomize the economic stagnation that has stricken our state. Clearly, the challenge of state government in the 1980s is to get our people back to work.
So the focus of this particular grant then will be to go into these rural areas and develop the necessary skills, training, preparation for people who already have this commitment, in an effort to try this technique at getting more health professionals who will go back into these rural areas and practice medicine or other professions.
3.
Biggers is a political tenderfoot in the race for State Senate Seat 23. He worked as a special assistant to the president of Tuskegee Institute before resigning recently to go into law practice in Tuskegee. He's also served as a legislative assistant to former U.S. Senator Donald Stewart. Biggers says he's talked to the people in the 6-county area, including Macon, Pike, Dale, Bullock, and Coffee counties, and they're telling him they can't find jobs. Biggers says he wants to do something about that.
These counties epitomize the economic stagnation that has stricken our state. Clearly, the challenge of state government in the 1980s is to get our people back to work. We cannot tolerate high unemployment.
President Reagan's new federalism plan is also on his mind. Biggers says the realignment of state and national authority places new responsibilities on state government. He says these new responsibilities require capable, effective, and responsible legislators. The only other announced candidate in the District 23 race is Governor James's former press secretary, Chris Bentz. Mike Weeks, who currently holds the seat, reportedly hasn't decided if he'll seek re-election. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
Clearly, the challenge of state government in the 1980s is to get our people back to work. We cannot tolerate high unemployment. Well, at this point, I know of no opposition. The only announced candidate that I'm aware of. Nearly 250,000 Alabama workers are on unemployment lines. Each day brings news of more business failures and more Alabamians out of work. The rural counties of District 23 have borne a disproportionate share of the hardship of this current recession. The unemployment rate in these counties is 3 and 4 times the state average.
The
benefits are expected to reach about 30,000 jobless workers in the state. At least 10,000 statewide are expected to file this week. The benefits are part of a joint federal and state program triggered into action by prolonged high unemployment. Many of the people who formed long lines at the claims office today have been looking for work for months, some for over a year. And the director of this claims office, Haney Harrison, says a trend has developed. More and more people showing up who've never been unemployed until now. It presents special problems, not only dealing with a loss of income, but a loss of self-worth. Many of these people have families to care for and bills they can't pay.
Have you been looking for work?
Yeah.
Have you found work?
No.
Is there any work to be found?
No. Not in Montgomery, Alabama. Probably nowhere else, really.
You know a lot of other people who are in the same situation?
Yeah.
What this all adds up to for many here today is a growing disappointment and anger. Disappointment in an economic system and anger at those people who suggest the people here don't want to work. One woman said, "Those who don't want to work aren't here." Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
Melvin started early in the season, and he wasn't playing up to his capability. And we had a couple of freshmen that, kind of got a lot of playing time that he might have gotten because he wasn't playing up to his capability. And then another thing is he and Lewis are very close, and Lewis can get him to do just about anything he wants him to. And he talked a lot to Melvin when he was hurt, when he found out he wasn't going to be able to play. And Melvin really came into the first ball game against Tuskegee, with his head on straight and willing to do a good job. And he is an excellent player, and I just hope he can continue to play like he is. It'll help us.
Tony Liuzzo was just 10 years old when his mother was killed 17 years ago. Mrs. Liuzzo was shot and killed during the 1965 Voting Rights March from Selma to Montgomery. Her son says now he feels the same sense of dedication that his mother felt back then, and that all people, no matter what their color, should have the right to vote.
I had mixed emotions, a little bit of fear at first before I came down. But if we stand by and we let fear stop us from doing, then nothing will ever get done. We might as well stop this march and go on back to Selma and just give up. But we can't. I feel good about being here. I hope to continue on where my mother left off, and that is to march down Dexter Avenue, because she never made it. She never got to walk through Montgomery.
Tomorrow, Tony Liuzzo will put a wreath on the spot where his mother was killed. He says he plans to walk up the steps of the Capitol and finish the march his mother was unable to complete. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News in Lowndes County. Tony Liuzzo says he feels the FBI is responsible for his mother's death. He says he's not satisfied at all with the investigation.
They're fighting us vigorously in the courts to try to to get any information pertaining to this case. They have been totally trying to slow the process down, claiming executive privilege on everything we asked for, so therefore we cannot see it. But I feel strongly that Gary Thomas Rowe is the one that killed my mother, and that if he's brought to trial, then the FBI brought to trial with him, because I feel that the FBI had their hand right on that.
Liuzzo says the FBI tried to dismantle the 1960 civil rights movement. He says his mother's death is a result of the agency's negligence. Tomorrow, Liuzzo will place a wreath at the spot where his mother was killed 17 years ago. He says he'll continue to march until they reach the Capitol, because he wants to finish the voting rights march his mother couldn't complete in 1965. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News in Lowndes County.
TV12 has learned that Bachelor is the subject of two investigations, one by the bank and another by the Montgomery County District Attorney's White-Collar Crime Unit. We've been told that there are a number of allegations pending against Bachelor. He's accused of making loans without taking financial statements from customers. He's alleged to have conspired with a friend to send him customers who reportedly did nothing more than sign a note and divide the money with Bachelor. My sources say those loan customers were never asked for any credit references before receiving the loans. One source told me of meeting the former Union Bank loan officer at the Green Lantern branch of the bank last year, and after signing a loan note, he allegedly split the money with Batchelor. I was told of another instance which is said to have occurred at the bank's downtown main office, where a loan was made and Batchelor allegedly received part of the loan. Our investigation into the allegations turned up the names of a number of Montgomery and Tuskegee business people who allegedly got unsecured loans from Batchelor and are now being asked to repay the money. At least 2 of those say that they are now being told that they owe more than the original loan that they signed with Batchelor. Attempts to reach Batchelor were unsuccessful, and the DA's office had no comment. Union Bank did reply to our inquiry about the Batchelor matter in this brief statement. Mr. Charles Batchelor resigned his position with the bank last year. The bank is aware that an investigation is being conducted by law enforcement officers in Montgomery County. Until such time as the results of that inquiry are made public, the bank will have no comment. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
Go ahead.
Dan, by every measure, it was the most successful tournament we've ever held and one of the largest and most successful promotions for the state of Alabama and the city of Montgomery. We've never had anything like the thousands of people that poured in here from all over the country, really, and particularly in the Montgomery area. It was a marvelous thing. It was clean. It was decent. People who love fishing could be a part of what was happening. And I might add, a lot of people in Montgomery, in the area, that are not really fishermen, came and became a part of this whole program. It was just a marvelous week.
Terrific shot in the arm for the economy as well, I understand.
I've been told, I haven't seen the figures, but I understand there's more than $6 million poured in as a result of this classic tournament that was held here this past October.
Going from town to town, getting people registered, politicizing them, having hearings that will be incorporated, I'm sure, in the testimonies that the Congress committees will be looking at, coming from you, those of you who have been intimidated, who have risked your lives, who have been deprived, who've been harassed day in and day out. Those people in Congress who make the policies need to know this. And I know that it's going to make a difference in terms of getting the Voting Rights Act reinstated. For you, Tony, has mixed feelings and emotions, and we understand that. But when I talk to my brothers and sisters,
Pick them up and put them down. Pick them up and put them down.
With only about 30 miles to go on their 140-mile crusade, the voting rights demonstrators are now marching through Lowndes County, Alabama, and they are back down to size after seeing their numbers swell to 800 when they marched out of Selma toward Montgomery on Sunday. But one who joined and stayed with them on U.S. Highway 80 was Tony Liuzzo of Detroit, whose mother, Viola Liuzzo, was murdered by the Ku Klux Klan here in Lowndes County on this road during the March for the Voting Rights Act in 1965.
I feel good about being here. I hope to continue on where my mother left off because she never made it. She never got to walk through Montgomery, and I plan to. I plan to walk to the steps of the Capitol and to be there in her place this time.
Yeah.
Last night in a packed Lowndes County church, local residents showed the marchers what had changed in the 17 years since the Voting Rights Act first passed. An array of black elected officials came forward, from sheriff to coroner. Before the 65 march, there wasn't even a black voter in Lowndes County. But the evening's high point was the arrival of another figure from 65, Coretta Scott King, wife of the late Dr. Martin Luther King.
When we marched in 1965, some of us thought that we wouldn't have to march again. We felt that somehow we had the Voting Rights Act, and I think some of us, black people, really didn't understand that we had to keep on getting that bill re-extended. Now, what we want now is to make sure that this time it is extended indefinitely so that we are protected.
Last night was the 10th night since the crusade began that the demonstrators had stopped in yet another church in yet another county or town in the Alabama Black Belt, rallying people for the Voting Rights Act. One speaker has described these fiery meetings as freedom revivals. Sam Ford, CBS News, Lowndes County, Alabama.
Sure. How are y'all? It's good to see all y'all. Y'all all look good. All right, that's the right hand full. Nothing serious, huh? Let's get a shot of the judge right now. Oh, yeah, this got colored like too bright. Okay, here comes the door. Let's move on down here to this other door before they close it. Go ahead. Do you know his name? Looks like everybody's hey, West.
No, they either have to come in and change it in person. Tell me how to make it back, so.
Yes.
How long have you lived in Montgomery? 4 months. Have you ever been convicted of any offense to pay legal? Hope not, no. Have you ever arrested over anyway? That's how they're changing this. Maybe longer than that. Okay, what county is that?
If Amendment number 4 passes, employees injured on the job who were covered by workman's compensation would be prohibited from suing fellow workers, even if the injury was due to negligence. The term fellow workers includes the company and its management. The bill would also prohibit employees from suing safety inspectors. The bill says the Alabama Supreme Court has allowed actions against fellow employees for personal injuries received on the job, but it's the purpose of this bill to overrule those decisions and forbid further and future actions by employees against each other. This amendment is the 4th item on the March 2nd ballot. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News.
Opponents claim some 250,000 workers in the state will be affected by the amendment if it's passed. Labor forces also say workers will face declining safety standards in factories and totally inadequate compensation for serious injuries. The president of the State Labor Council, Barney Weeks, says big business is using, quote, lies and scare tactics to try and intimidate workers to vote for the amendment. And he says he wants to set the record straight.
Big business is claiming the amendment is to prevent one worker from suing another co-worker. The truth is that not one single award in a suit against a worker by a fellow worker has ever been awarded in Alabama, not one. Big business is saying lack of such an amendment is costing us jobs. The truth is that passage of this amendment will not add a single job to our state.
Weeks says the State Labor Council will launch a campaign speaking out against passage of the amendment, but supporters of the bill have also launched their campaign, saying Alabama is the only state in the Southeast to pass a co-employee liability law. Supporters also cite 14 cases where hourly employees are suing fellow workers for injuries suffered on the job, and they claim at least 2 industries have decided not to locate in Alabama as a direct result of the state's co-employee law.
And it is progressively increasing, it seems, as a problem, and we are awfully afraid that that it will hurt us in our efforts to attract new industry to the state.
Voters will decide the issue March 2nd. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News. The co-employee bill.
We can't sue the company or the insurance company for negligence if we're injured or even totally disabled on the job.
This television advertisement is sponsored by the State Labor Council. Labor forces want voters to say no to Amendment Number 4. They say if the amendment passes, workers will suffer from inadequate compensation for serious injuries and face declining safety standards on the job. Supporters of the amendment say Alabama is the only state in the nation with such co-employee liability, but the labor leaders say that's part of a campaign by big businesses and insurance companies who would be protected by the amendment rather than the average worker. But backers of the bill have their own media campaign.
Side by side with him every day. And if he gets hurt on the job, this man can sue you for everything you've got.
Supporters say if industries find out Alabama doesn't have the co-employee protection, many will decide against locating here. The backers of the amendment, who have the support of Governor James, say 2 industries refused to come to Alabama as a direct result of the question of co-employee liability. They also say several hundred lawsuits have been filed by employees suing their fellow employees in the state. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
The vote was 5-4 against the proposed change in the parade route approved last week, and it came after relatively little discussion. Councilwoman Elise Reynolds restated her argument that businessmen along Dexter Avenue would suffer if the street was blocked to traffic as long as it would take for the march to pass. But Councilman Donald Watkins submitted a petition signed by 32 businessmen on Dexter Avenue who said they didn't mind if the march passed their way. The real discussion came after the vote. March Representative Vanzetta Durant said the businessmen's petition disproved Reynolds' arguments that downtown merchants don't want the march there.
I'm even more regretful that the vote was on a 5-4 and a 5-white, 4-black basis. That this city and this council are still racially divided.
Reynolds said it isn't the marchers' cause she protests, but she says 32 names don't represent everyone on Dexter Avenue.
We have consistently denied parade permits down Dexter Avenue, and to grant yours would open up for all other marches. Now you and
there were many more arguments on both sides, but the decision stands. However, some march officials have already said they will march all the way up Dexter Avenue. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
The trial didn't begin until 2 p.m. with most of the day spent striking a jury of 2 blacks and 10 whites. More than 24 witnesses were sworn in. 13 took the witness stand for the prosecution. Pringle is charged in connection with the July 26 robbery and murder of Magic Market clerk Larry Dominguez and 7-Eleven employee Andy Adams. Pringle's co-defendant, William Bush, was convicted and sentenced to die in the electric chair in November for his part in the crime. Today, Pringle sat motionless with a solemn look throughout most of the testimony, which came from Montgomery police investigators who were involved in the case. Dozens of photographs of the crime scenes were entered into evidence, as was a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson revolver, which was allegedly used by Pringle and Bush during the commission of the crimes. Two key witnesses for the prosecution who took the witness stand were Superfoods employee Teresa Weatherly and off-duty police officer Michael Farrier, both of whom pointed at Pringle across the courtroom and identified him as the man who entered the Superfood store on Fairview the day after the robberies and tried to cash a payroll check with 7-Eleven employee Andy Adams' name on it. After hearing testimony from a 13th witness, Judge Joseph Phelps dismissed the sequestered jury at 5 p.m. for a supper break. The trial continues at 6:30. From the Montgomery County Courthouse, Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
With careers in politics and public service. Gray served on the Pasadena City Council for 4 years.
Seem to demand fruition of the gloom they predict. I just wish that somebody would tell the They say Reaganomics has failed. My Lord, it hasn't even been begun. It started in October. And yet all of the sorrows and the deprivations that people are now encountering are a result, allegedly, of Reaganomics.
Everything's under control at this time. Careful.